Okay, so welcome to Israel Talks with Paushali. Today I have a very special guest, an absolute expert on Middle Eastern topics. So, Professor of Middle Eastern Studies, Dr. Josef Olmert. Welcome.
Thank you very
And
much for inviting me.
yeah, and Dr. Olmert is specialized in the areas of Syria, Lebanon, and Middle East minorities. He was also part of the Israeli government peace negotiating team in the 1990s. And I will let you share a bit about your illustrious career. So,
Well,
over to you.
first of all, thanks so much for inviting me. And I've heard a lot about your podcast and how significant it is and how popular it is. I don't want to talk too much about myself, but I would say that I've done my PhD in the London School of Economics in the late 1970s already, under the guidance of the famous Professor Eli Keduri, the late Eli Keduri. And I was having a rich academic career, including teaching in Tel Aviv University and then in some American universities, including Cornell University. The last one was the University of South Carolina, where I retired from actual teaching over a year ago.
Mhm.
And I can say it's a fact that I was elected by students poll as the best professor of the university. And
Oh, Mazal Tov.
thank you very much. When I retired, the governor of the state himself came and gave a speech, in my honor and all that. So, I've had all kinds of connections. And in the last 2 years, of course, I've been a lot connected to the situation in the Middle East, with speciality, of course, about Israel fighting in 6 or 7 fronts. But always in touch also with my Kurdish friends in the Middle East, and they interview me on television, in writing. I remember the first time I got a call from an unknown world area code. So I checked it. I saw it's Iraq. I said, "Oh, come on, what could it be in Iraq?" Well,
Mhm.
but he said, "I'm a friend. I'm from Erbil."
Mhm.
It was years back. So, of course, I'm watching now very, very carefully also the situation with regard to Iran and the Kurdish problem and all that comes with it. I'm in your hands.
Yeah, so before we turn to the current situation in Syria, Turkey, and with the Kurdish people, I want to just say it's an honor to have you here because with all your expertise, you can really contribute to a rich discussion here. Now, but before I go further onto the topic of Kurds, I want to ask you what made you curious or what made you even get involved in the research about Middle East minorities and
It's a
why the
good
Kurdish
question.
people?
When I was about 14, 15 years old, I won't tell you how many years back it was. It was the time of the great instability in Syria in the 60s. And the story of Eli Cohen, the
Yeah.
Israeli spy, caught
Mhm.
my attention, and I became obsessed with it in a positive way, of course. And,
Mhm.
then the tragedy of his hanging. Many, many years later, I was involved in Israel in all kinds of activities with his family, mainly with his widow, about trying to bring back his remains to Israel. So I became very interested in Syria, and Syria, composed of minorities, and that led me to
Mhm.
Lebanon. So
Right.
it was my decision to be interested in the Middle East, and then, of course, in minorities. But there was another reason, and this is that already at that time, and of course, before the 60s, when I started to be interested in it, but even before it, there was a very strong opinion in Israel that we in Israel should be more attentive to the fact that the Middle East is not just an Arab and Islamic. There are
Mhm.
lots and lots of minorities, and we are a minority in the Middle East. We are a majority in our country, but not in the Middle East. So
Right.
that created an ideology in Israel of the necessity to create the so-called the alliance of the minorities. And I
Mhm.
was very tuned to it, not necessarily in full agreement with it. And that also led me to more interest in this topic. Then, of course, came the war in Lebanon in 1982, when
Mm.
Israel invaded Lebanon in the Operation Peace for Galilee. And I became popular in Israeli media, later on all over the world about what's going on in Lebanon and all that. And I need to tell you, and that may surprise you, that even though I did adhere in general terms,
Mm-hmm.
sense that there should be much more Israeli attention with the minorities and support to and whatever, the war in Lebanon did cool it off for me because I was very, very upset about the attitude of the Lebanese Maronites.
Mm-hmm.
And I cautioned about it. But by the way, before the war, I cautioned about that to the point where later on, there were lots of people who said, why did Dr. Olmert say about the Maronite what so-called leaders did not know in Israel? Uh,
Right.
I can tell you something personal about that. It was after the Sabra and Shatila tragic massacre of Palestinians by the Christian phalangists.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it was the Jewish Rosh Hashanah New Year, that
Mm-hmm.
particular time. And we went to visit my parents. And my mother, late mother, said immediately to me, she was a clever woman. She said, I understand that more or less the war in Lebanon is more or less ruined for Israel after what happened. I said, yes. And that's what I said immediately afterwards. It didn't make me popular with the government at that time, even though I was more close to Likud altogether
Mm-hmm.
politically. And I'm still very interested, of course, in minorities, you know. You're
Mm-hmm.
going to ask me about the Kurds. But the truth of the matter is, and one has to say that in the last 10 years or so, more serious questions have been aroused about that from an Israeli perspective because the warming up of relations between Israel and some of the Sunni Arab countries that led
Mm-hmm.
later on to the Abraham Accords. So the Abraham Accords were the opposite of the
Right.
concept of the alliance of minorities because it
Mm-hmm.
represents the Sunni majority, or at least part of the Sunni majority of the Middle East. So the overall question, therefore, is Israel and minorities. I go beyond myself now. I mean, you know, my interest. The overall question here has changed in terms of emphasis
Mm-hmm.
in the last few years.
Mm-hmm. Right. So, um, now you've written a lot about the Kurds, especially. So I've read quite a lot of articles, and so before we start with the topic of war and all, would you please share with us a little bit about who the Kurds are, a bit about their history, culture, and where do they come from? So
Well,
if
first of
anybody's
all,
not aware of. Mhm.
you have to bear in mind that there is a huge community of Kurdish Jews in Israel,
Yeah, I
and
know.
particularly in Jerusalem, but not
Hmm.
only. And when I was a student in the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, I had a lot of Kurdish Jewish friends, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Best restaurants were in that neighborhood, the best falafel, the best hummus,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and
Yeah.
tahina and all that. I mean, we have to understand something, and that is about minorities. How do you define a minority in the Middle East? The way I give it is
Right.
all those people who are not at the same time Arabic speaking and Sunni Muslims. That is
Mm-hmm.
to say, you can be a Muslim, but if you're not an Arab, you're a minority. You
Right.
can be Arab, but if you are not a Muslim, you're a minority because you're a
Mm-hmm.
Christian Arab.
Mm-hmm.
The Kurds definitely fall into that category because even though most of them, by the way, not all of them, most of them
Mm-hmm.
are Sunnis, even though there is a Shia minority in Iraq and Iran, the Faili Kurds, as they're called, they are a different, distinct ethnic group,
Mm-hmm.
different languages. By the way, there are three basically Kurdish
Mm-hmm.
dialects or languages: the Kermanji, the Sorani, and the Zaza. Mostly Kermanji and the Sorani, and they really define themselves as a group mostly by their ethnicity rather than by their religion.
Right.
That can be
Mm-hmm.
said. Now, their languages are basically Aryan. They're not
Mm-hmm.
Semitic.
Mm-hmm.
They're closer to Farsi, if at all,
Right.
but not
Mm-hmm.
even close to Arabic, not even
Mm-hmm.
close. I mean, you know, there may be words now used because of the common Islamic heritage, you know. And they are the people, the largest ethnic group in the Middle East that does not have the basic rights of self-determination. You're talking about
Yeah.
40 million people, 40 million. In Turkey alone, they might be about 18 million to 20 million.
Yeah.
In Iran, about 8 millions. In Iraq, about 8 millions or 7. In Syria now that we talk about 2 to 3 million, so maybe 37, 38 million.
Well, I've heard from the Kurdish Jews in Jerusalem, they say
Yeah.
there's about 70 million around the world.
No, that's a typical Middle East exaggeration, you know. You know, it's almost a joke that I had with friends from Lebanon whenever I asked them, what's the ethnic division in Lebanon? So they gave me numbers that came to 300%. So I said,
Hmm.
look, we can't have 300%. It has to be 100%. So we used to drop 1 0, then cut by half, you know. No, there are no 70 millions. And even among the 38 or 40 millions, and Syria is an example of that, some of the Kurds, and you see it in Syria, less so in Iraq, less so in Iran, but also in Turkey, have mixed up with the Arabs and Turkish majorities in these countries because they moved from nomadic life to more settled urban life.
Hmm.
And if you talk about Syria, which bring me to Syria now, it's a very common, used to be very common situation in Syria, whereby the Kurds were always considered to be the silent majority, a minority,
Hmm.
the minority that is not really an active player in the overall communal tension that characterized the modern history of Syria. That was, of course, not the case anymore in the last 20 or so years, but used to be the silent minority. And you'll be surprised to hear, I mean, our viewers, the three first military dictators of Syria were all of Kurdish origin.
Oh, really?
Hosni Zaim, yes, Hosni Zaim, Sami Henawi, and Adib Shishakli, but also Kurdish Turkish mix. The
Hmm.
Barazi family with prime ministers, also Kurdish, Turkish, you know. So that's who they are, you know. I mean, they are a distinct ethnic group,
Hmm.
nationalist, national group with different language, with different culture, you know. And yes, they are Muslims. It's true, they're Muslims, but it's not enough to create them part of the majority.
Right. Okay. But there are
And
also a lot
just
of Kurdish Jews, like the Jews that the
yeah,
Kurdish Jews who live in Israel. They are.
yeah, well, 99% of Kurdish Jews live in Israel, or, you
Mm.
know, particularly in Jerusalem and also in some other places like Tiberias in the north.
Mm.
But they've always been a small minority in the overall Kurdish population. By the way, their mother languages reflect the Kurdish regions from where they came. So some
Right.
of them will
Hmm.
speak Kurdish, some of them will speak Sorani, some of them will
Right.
speak Kermanji, the majority of them. And
Mm.
some of them, by the way, speak their particular version of a Jewish language that was used
Ah,
at that
okay.
time. You talk here about 5 or so thousand people in Israel who still talk this language, you know. So
Wow. Okay.
it's very interesting. It's very interesting. Just one word
Mm.
that you'll need to realize that while the Kurds are the largest ethnic group in the Middle East not to have their own freedom, you see now the beginnings in Northern Africa of the
Hmm.
Amazigh, or what they
Yeah.
used to call the Berber national movement.
Yeah.
And their numbers are very large because you talk here about 30 or 40% of the population of Algeria, and
Hmm.
maybe 20 or 30% in Morocco. So you're
Right.
talking about millions.
Yeah.
But it's a beginning of a new movement. We'll see more
Mm.
about them in the future, I guess.
Right. Oh, so the indigenous people of the lands, they need to become more visible. Yeah.
And you know what about indigenous peoples of the land? And then again, something that will surprise our viewers here.
Mm.
There is in Jerusalem an international indigenous embassy with
Yeah.
representatives of Maoris in New Zealand, Aboriginals
Hmm.
in Australia, and Native Americans and Canadians and South Americans.
Hmm.
And it's very interesting because the core of the Palestinian and the anti-Zionist and anti-Jewish and anti-Israel propaganda is these are settler colonialism. You know,
Hmm.
you are in Australia and you speak about the Jews that were 3,000 years were in the land and they're settler colonialists. It should have been like a joke, you know, but you know
Yeah.
what happens? People do believe in it, but that's, you know.
Well, that's just a lack of education. It's just ignorance, really, around the world. And whatever catches the head, whatever is on the headlines, people follow that instead of taking the time to dig into something. But yeah, most people are lazy, I guess. And therefore, we have this situation in the world. But let's turn our attention to where it's very volatile at the moment. Um, I would like to hear your thoughts about what happened in Aleppo since the last few weeks and now in Rojava since yesterday's, yeah,
First of all, let's
meeting.
explain that the vast majority of Kurds in Syria are living in the north of Syria, northeast, the Rojava area, we'll come to that, and
Mm-hmm.
northwest, the Kurdag area in Turkish. Dag means mountain, the mountain of the Kurds
Mm-hmm.
around Aleppo and in Aleppo itself. By the way, there was a big neighborhood of Kurds in Damascus with a very important Kurdish leader living there, the only communist to
Mm-hmm.
be freely elected democratically to a parliament in an Arab country was the Kurdish historic leader of the Syrian Communist Party, Khalid Bakdash. He died, you know. The other communists to be freely elected are Israeli Arabs in Israel, in a country
Right.
that they call apartheid state, you know.
Mm.
It's,
Yeah.
uh, what really happened is two things have happened. One of them is that the government of Al-Julani in Syria
Mm-hmm.
got basically its recognition from the Western countries, from the Western world, France and others, but then President Trump, no other.
Mm-hmm.
And they decided to extend their control over the areas of the minorities. So it didn't work for them with the Druze because of the Israeli defense. And here is a point to be made. The border between Israel and Syria, on the other side of it, Druze people.
Mm-hmm.
It does work for them among the Alawis, although what
Mm-hmm.
we don't see in the media of the West are the terrible, horrific videos coming out from the Alawi territories about what they are doing there. There will
Mm-hmm.
be troubles in the Alawi territory. There will be troubles, I can tell you. The Alawis will not accept it. It's just a question of time.
Right.
And now the Kurds, it's like one after the other. And they got a green light from the mother country of them, which is Turkey.
Yeah.
And why does Turkey don't want the Kurds in those
Mm-hmm.
areas? Because
Mm-hmm.
the Turks consider northern Syria,
Right.
with Aleppo at its center,
Mm-hmm.
as a Turkish influenced territory.
Mm-hmm.
In my PhD thesis, it was about Syria and Lebanon, you can imagine, in the Second World War, there was interesting mentioning about Aleppo.
Mm-hmm.
Because when the British wanted to invade Syria and Lebanon to liberate them from the Vichy French in the summer of 1941,
Yeah.
Churchill thought that the British forces were not enough to do it, so they needed support. So he wanted to take the Turks into and lure them by offering them Aleppo.
Mm-hmm.
And the Turks at that time said, you know, we are not interested. We know the Arabs, we have ruled them for 400 years, it's enough, in so many words. They didn't want to do it because they were afraid of the Germans, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Once the British took over northern Syria, the Turks asked about Aleppo. So
Right.
what about Aleppo? Is it still relevant? So then Churchill said, well, you know, in diplomacy, timing is 50% of everything. That was the end of it. But it shows to you that the Turkish interest in Aleppo is not a new one.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely they encouraged, supported, and still do support Giuliani's forces in doing what they do to the Kurds in Aleppo.
So Jelani's forces are basically proxies for Turkey.
The Giuliani regime is a proxy for Turkey.
Mm.
And that comes back to what we discussed before or mentioned before about Trump, President Trump. President Trump does not want to break the relations with Turkey.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to get into all these definitions of Erdogan as a nice guy and Al-Julani as an handsome, good-looking guy. The interest really is Turkey is a important member of NATO, and they have a role, which gives them also
Mm-hmm.
in Gaza, which is unheard of, but it's another story. The Giuliani regime is under Turkish influence.
Mm.
The interest of Turkey is to create a Kurdish Rhine, free of Kurds area on the border with Turkey. And that's what it is. Look, that's what it is. Now, we have to make a point here. And I have to make it. And I say it so that also my good Kurdish friends will hear it. It was expected that the Kurds will put a stronger resistance to what happened.
Mm,
It has to be still discussed and inquired why they haven't done enough resistance.
mm,
Because the same question you could ask also about the lack of resistance in 2017 after the referendum, when there was an invasion basically to the Kurdish area and they gave up almost without battle. We need to check about it. It
mm,
really saddens me. And in the last 2 or 3 nights, I lose a lot of hours trying to figure out what happened there. And I don't get enough of an answer.
mm,
Donald Trump betrayed the Kurds in Syria to the point now where he even kept quiet over the fact that the so-called agreement between the Kurds and the Al-Julani, with Turks in the background,
mm,
from 2 days ago was that the Julani people will not move to this eastern side of the Euphrates,
mhm,
where the Kurds have the oil and natural gas fields.
mm.
They did.
Yeah,
And they did.
Deresor, right? Mm,
Yeah. And they did. Now, Rojava is what we talk about now. Rojava is the Kurdish name for the North-Eastern
mm,
autonomous Kurdish area that was declared in 2012 after the beginning of the civil war in Syria.
mm,
Here again, the quick defeat of the Kurdish forces is very sad, of course. It's tragic. And I still need to understand exactly how it happened because you talk about the same Kurds that so
mhm. Yeah.
heroically stopped ISIS and did a dirty job in Kobani, if you remember, and other
Mm,
places,
yeah.
free other places, 6, 7, 8 years ago, or even more.
Mm,
What happened now? The Julani forces are still a disorganized combination of gangs and militias.
mm,
One could have expected something else to happen, but maybe what happened was, and that's even adding up to the sadness altogether,
mm,
there was too much trust in the goodwill of the US, and one has to say it.
mhm,
And one has to say it. And I'll tell you something about it. I today, Sunday, the 18th of January, I posted something about Iran, which comes into the picture here.
mm,
If you are a leader that calls upon the Iranian people to go to the streets,
mm,
knowing that they are going to be slaughtered, you are owing them help and support.
right.
And we should hear more about that.
Mm,
Disappointed Iranians.
mhm,
They already start getting feelers about it. Rojava fell too quickly.
mm,
And maybe the main reason is this almost blind trust in the American so-called guarantees, which, by the way, the same story happened in 2017 in Iraq
mm,
after the referendum,
mhm,
when the Barzani Kurds
mm,
basically almost gave up without battle because
right.
Trump was supposed to help them. Now, another point here, and we have to say to our Kurdish friends,
Mm,
were they totally united?
mhm,
Because in Iraq, they were not. The Talibanis on the one end, the Barzanis on the other end. It's an historic clash, that is ideological, political, and tribal.
mm,
So look, it's not over yet. Nothing is over in Syria until it's over, as they say in American baseball.
yeah.
It's not over yet. The Julani forces are not in total control of the Alawite territory, not in total control of the Kurdish territory. There will be troubles there. There will be
Mm,
troubles there. And in all kinds of ways. But definitely for 13 or 14 years, there was self-rule in northeastern Syria of the Kurds, like the one in Iraq,
mm.
and it just collapsed in a matter of days.
So this is all very, as you said, you've lost some sleep, and this is what is making me really, it's a very troubling thing if you think about it, because in 2012 to 2014, when ISIS was wreaking havoc and the Kurds helped America, They were their biggest ally, right? They fought off ISIS, as you also mentioned. And but they had this support from the American government with weapons, with whatever it takes to get rid of ISIS. But now it seems like the opposite is happening. So there is betrayal for the Kurds, there's betrayal to the Iranians, as you rightly say. If you call for people to come out and protest, and then there is no help, and what is going on? Trump is promising help, then there is again no help, again promising. I mean, what is actually going on? Something beyond what meets the eye. And then you see the Gaza Peace Board with Qatar, Turkey, Pakistan being invited. There is.
I cautioned many people before Trump's election that the second term will not be like the first one.
Mhm,
And I have various theories about that. I've written a lot about it, talked a lot about it. Part of my theory is that in the first term, look, he did lots of good things
mhm,
to Israel, moving the embassy to Jerusalem and so on. But the way he understood it was everything that Biden did, I do the opposite.
mhm,
So Biden was
mhm.
taken to be the one that would not
Right.
move the embassy, despite the fact that it was the stated policy.
Mhm,
He supported, of course, the nuclear deal with Iran and all that. I do the opposite. Now he doesn't need to do the opposite of Biden. Now he has to do something that will enable him to be the peace person. That's one theory. The other theory is he really looks at the Middle East as a secondary arena.
mhm,
The first arena for importance to him is the Pacific, is China.
mhm,
And he really wants to remove from the agenda issues that would be kind of a problem for America. So also South America in that sense is part of it. But pay attention to something here, which is again connected with China.
mhm,
He goes after Venezuelan oil
mhm,
and he is tightening the screws of sanctions on Iranian oil, the two
mhm,
countries that support China with oil.
mhm,
So you can argue cynically that's an American policy. I mean, that he sacrifices interest in some part of the world in order to support his overall coming confrontation with China as he understands it to be. Another explanation is, look, Turkey.
mhm.
Talk about Syria and Iraq and Iran later. Turkey. Turkey is a member of NATO,
Right.
and he thinks that Turkey is more important. And the tragedy of the Kurds traditionally, historically, has always been that when the Shah was very strong, he cut support to the Kurds in 1975 because of the Algeria Accord with Saddam. So their rebellion in Iraq collapsed.
Mhm,
The Turks, strong government. The Assad government was very strong
mhm,
until it became whatever,
mhm,
and of course the Iranians, strong governments. And the Kurds always seem to be the ones that are right, that are morally justified,
mhm, mhm.
but in terms of the overall geopolitical context, they are less important. And
Yeah,
it's
the
as
same.
typical as that, it's Turkey.
Mm,
When it comes to Iran,
mhm.
there are reports that the Kurds in Iran were more active against the regime than other parts of Iran. For example, we
Right.
didn't hear too much about the Azeris
Mhm,
thing. Trump decided not to do anything in Iran. It may change tonight or the day after because it's somewhat whimsical, as we know, and there still are reports about military preparations.
mhm.
He decided not to intervene in Iran
Right.
for other reasons. And the Kurds were falling into this because they are part of the opposition. They are not the entire
Mm,
opposition. And then, of course, you come to Gaza and you ask yourself the question, what is happening here? So again, Turkey
mm,
and, and Qatar.
mm,
What the Americans don't understand is that people in the Middle East did take them seriously.
mhm,
And they want to believe or wanted to believe that he means what he says.
mm,
And he is having the problem that was the problem of Obama in Syria in 2013, when Obama said at that time, if the Bashar Assad regime crosses the line of using chemical weapons, we shall
Mm.
stop it. And
Mhm.
it did it, Bashar, and nothing happened. The Saudis were the first to realize that Obama is not reliable or credible or
Right.
serious.
Mm-hmm.
And so Trump is in a problem here.
Mm.
It is therefore, and we have to emphasize it, the 18th of January, on the 19th of January, we might hear news about whatever happens in Iran and all that. The Iranians are behaving now like they won the battle and they insult Trump and whatever. So you never know. But these are the reasons here. These are the reasons.
Right. You've been involved in Middle East politics and also in negotiations and all. Now, from your experience also, would you say that to work in the Middle East, it's not appeasement. You really need to use force. Where would you agree? Or how far does dialogue and
You always use force in order to promote political agenda. I mean, the famous situation here, politics is the continuation of war and vice versa. But look, uh, Trump likes to think that he's a winner.
hmm
So interesting. Look, put aside everything that I just told you. There's something else about him. He likes to be a winner.
hmm
When he saw that Israel is defeating Iran in July, he joined it in the last minute, not
Right.
before. They took their time. They took their time. They were not sure about it.
mm
Nobody could expect that Israeli victory will be so decisive.
mm
So I still don't rule out something will happen about Iran and all that. The question of Qatar is something else altogether here.
mm
I'm really in a position here where I always feel like it's about gossiping because you might say, look, he got a plane from Qatar. Steve Witkoff has been involved with Qatari business before. So what's going on here? I mean, is it really American policy or some
mm
personal agendas and all this? I mean, think about it. Qatar is a very insignificant country in the end of the day. They have no power other than the money that they have.
mhm.
But in order to keep their money going, they need the protection of the Americans. And once they get it, they talk to the Americans as if they were like their servants.
Right.
And this is really not typical of Trump to play the role of second pedal.
mm hmm
But that's why I'm a bit confused here. And, you interview somebody and you present me in that case like a professor, like an expert, and people say, okay, so what answer? Sometimes the questions are more complicated than the answers
Yeah,
because the
yeah,
answers are a function of the question. It's not so simple.
yeah.
The Trump policy is very convoluted at this
hmm
moment, very convoluted at this moment.
hmm True. Okay, but let's let's see what we do have information about. Now, I know because I'm regularly in touch with the Kurdish people and all. But why is the media not reporting? So why is there such little attention? I understand that Iran is obviously a bigger threat, for example, for Israel. And so there is attention on Iran. And in terms of numbers, also, like huge numbers of people are getting killed. And Iran is a nuclear power and all of that. But what is going on with the Kurds? And we heard about ISIS non-stop between, I don't know, 2012 to 2014. So it's the same region. What's going on? Why are we not hearing?
Very simple reason. Look, one of my courses was about American press and the coverage of foreign policy. Look, I
hmm
was the Israeli government spokesperson. I know the American press. I appeared all over the place. I know them all.
hmm
Now, my generation is already passé. I mean, so, but I know the system. I know how they work. They report only, and I emphasize, only when there is a direct, immediate American interest at play.
Okay.
For example, if they thought that what happens with the Kurds would lead to an American intervention or whatever, something against American interests, they would have reported it. Otherwise, they don't care. They do not care.
Okay.
Simple as that. Give you an example.
mm,
Take Libya. So let's
mm,
go a little bit to the recent past.
mm,
Joe Biden, interesting fellow, by the way. I met him personally. I know him. I
mhm,
met him. Great. In his better years, he was brilliant. He said something very interesting in 2015 or 16. Here
mm,
is the example between us and the Bush administration. See what they did in Iraq, intervention, and then the $1 trillion wasted, 5,000 soldiers killed, and the Iranians are influencing Iraq.
mm,
See what we did in Libya.
mhm,
We sent our Air Force,
mm,
$700 million it cost us. Gaddafi is non-existent, not even one American was killed.
mm.
That's it, we achieved our goal. Since 2011, there is no Libya.
Yeah.
Civil war, two Libyas. Khalifa, whatever his name there in the Benghazi area and the Tripoli government.
Mm,
Terrible civil war, complete collapse and all that. Who talks about that in America?
right.
Because it doesn't touch an American interest anymore.
Mm,
So
mhm,
we didn't do anything in Libya like Biden said, and yet nobody talks about it because no American interest seems to be connected to it. That's exactly the reason.
yeah.
And this is what people don't understand about the US. Isolationism in the US is a cultural frame of mind, much beyond politics and ideology. It's like we are the world.
Yeah, okay, but then why so much interest in Gaza? I mean, we know about the Qatari money, of course, influence on college campuses, but why so much attention on Gaza and Israel and nothing now?
Two or three reasons. First of all, there's anti-Semitism.
Mhm,
People don't like to hear it, but there is a lot of anti-Semitism.
sure.
Secondly, it was a gift to the anti-Israel left wing and isolationists on the other end as well, which are more or less in the right wing.
Mm,
For Israel is a puppet of the US,
mm,
so-called. Whatever Israel does is because of the US.
mhm.
So again, they connected it to the US. What was
Right, okay.
the main claim of the demonstrations against Israel was they are terrible, the Israelis, genocide, all this nonsense,
Mm,
but they do it with American money.
right. Hmm.
Isolationists don't like it.
Yeah.
And they do it with American weapons, which the left wing doesn't like.
Hmm.
No.
Okay.
Why are you surprised? Let me tell you something. There was and still is a guru of the left wing, Noam Chomsky.
Mm,
I debated with him in 1985 on Canadian television. I know who he is.
mm,
Noam Chomsky justified Pol Pot in Cambodia. Why did he justify? He denied the genocide in Cambodia.
hmm.
Because what do you want from the Cambodians? It's all because of America. See what they did in Vietnam. Play to all that. What happens in Iran, in Gaza, therefore, is the opposite here. See what the Americans are doing. Because of the Americans, the Israelis
Mm,
can do whatever. So
right.
because you are initially against Israel, like a
Mm,
colonial settler, whatever,
hmm.
and anti-Zionist, so here it is. Now, why not Iran? It's
Mm,
domestic Iranian affair.
mm.
It's nothing to do with America.
So
And if
human
we
rights
intervene
is.
in Iran, if we support the opposition in Iran, then it's becoming an American issue.
Mm,
Why does America do it? So that's what happens. Look, you have to understand the American media also doesn't have enough manpower and expertise to deal with foreign policy issues.
hmm.
For example, NBC News.
Mm,
There is a problem in Ukraine, Richard Engel here. A problem in Israel, Richard Engel there. Venezuela, Richard Engel there. How many people do they have? Or any other of the big networks? And the ones who do have CNN are, they're biased.
mm,
By definition, third worldist.
very. Yeah. Okay, well that makes a lot of sense. Um, Now Iran. Okay, let's go to Iran. Um, what do you think is going to happen?
Look, from the very beginning, I had a doubt whether the wave of demonstrations is going to succeed. Not that I didn't support it and do support it 100%. Among other reasons, unfortunately, the Reza Pahlavi is not putting people in the streets like Khomeini did on the
Mm,
other side 45 or 47
mm,
years. The regime is not close to collapse yet. The security forces are coherent. The
mm,
Shah army collapsed. They
mhm,
don't have the army anymore. They do have their own security forces.
mm,
And that's interesting. So you can ask yourself, what is a stronger loyalty, religious loyalty or secular nationalist loyalty
mm,
to the ruler? Which
mhm.
is a good question to ask.
Yeah.
And there is not enough or not at all foreign support to the
Mm,
opposition. However, it's clear that the Iranian people by and large don't like them.
mhm,
It's clear that they cannot change the regime.
mm,
The religious regime cannot change.
mm,
Because if they change, they accept the idea that they were wrong religiously. This is something that they can't look. It's like it's a religion. What can they say? They can allow now women without the hijab. They can allow now any other of the demands that means that Iran will not look religious.
mm,
From their perspective, it is heresy, and they're not going to accept it. On the contrary, they're going to even tighten their grip over the people because they know that they have a problem.
mm,
So what can you do, really? What can you do? You can do something that will really create such a distress that they will have to change or else. And this is to go after their oil industry.
mm. So more economic sanctions, really, or
Not just this, take over Harj. Instead
mm,
of Greenland, take Harj.
mm,
Suggestion. Take
mm,
Harj instead of
mhm.
Greenland. In Greenland, the oil might be underneath. You have to dig for it. In Harj, it's already there.
Yeah, yeah.
The Iranian regime during this situation hasn't lost more than what they already lost in the sanctions.
Mm,
And the only idea was, are they going to use the military or not? Which meant, is the military or the Basij and the Revolutionary Guards are loyal or not? They proved to be loyal.
mm,
And why are they loyal? Because A, they are imbued with religious fanaticism, but also, bear in mind, they are, I don't know, they say that the Basij and the Revolutionary Guards altogether and the army might be 2 million people. Add
mm.
up these, their families,
Yeah,
they are significant part of the population and they enjoy the regime.
yeah.
They enjoy the regime. Look, you have an example, take Egypt.
Mm,
The Muslim Brotherhood won the free elections, the only one that existed. But they were thrown out by the military. Look at this
mm,
Egyptian military, at the army of the interior ministry, the Egyptian version of whatever, Basij. Yeah.
mm.
They are 1.5 million people with their families and all this. It's, you know,
Quite a
they
number.
the
Yeah.
fruits of the regime. If you attack the regime to the point where they cannot cater for these people, they fall.
Mm.
And we are not even close to that.
Right. So I wonder what happened with the June attacks of last year with all the nuclear facilities gone. I mean, nothing,
Well, yeah, okay, the nuclear facilities have gone, and the regime suffered a
well,
great
they're
deal.
obviously not completely gone. I can't believe that. But
I think that their ability to continue the nuclear program the way it was until now has been drastically curtailed, not
yeah,
totally.
drastically curtailed. But why is no one speaking about Pakistan? Pakistan has a lot of collaboration with Iran, nuclear.
Who has to talk about Pakistan, India, and the US? But I mean, if we're
Yeah,
talking
well,
about Israel,
yeah.
it's too much for Israel to deal with all that. Look, uh, you remember what happened in Iran in the last day of the war. The Iranians broke the ceasefire, and
Mhm.
there was a rocket in Beersheba, and 4 people were
Yeah,
killed.
yeah.
52 Israeli aircraft were on their way
Mm,
to deal with some most significant target that they did not want to deal with until then.
mm,
And complete freedom of action over Iran. And
mm.
you know what happened? Trump called them back, ordered Netanyahu to send them back, and he complied.
Right.
So, as people say, Israel is the only country in the world that is not allowed to have full military victory.
Mm,
And if you compare it, say, to the Yom Kippur War, you remember
mm,
that the Israeli army besieged the Third Egyptian Army, and then the fact that we did not destroy the Egyptian army completely led to peace with Egypt.
mhm,
But not completely destroying, say, Hamas in Gaza
mm.
or the Iranians would lead to peace with whom? With the Ayatollahs? With Hamas? Never.
Yeah, never. Okay, I I have to get back to the Kurds again since we are on the point of Iran, and it might be a bit of a sensitive topic to talk about. But the Shah, okay, the Shah dynasty, they did a lot of good stuff, and especially to the Jews. And there is this big talk about uh, Javid Shah coming, this continuation of the Pahlavi dynasty and everything. So um, they were the dynasty was not that great with the Kurds, right? And the
Not great
Kurds
at
today,
all. You are diplomatic.
I'm being very diplomatic, yeah.
Not
But
good at all. Yeah, sure.
and the Kurds today also, they don't want to live under the Shah if he
Well, as
takes
I
on.
said before, Reza Shah, Reza Pahlavi
Hmm.
is not the Shah now. He can be called Shah by people, but he's out of Iran, so call him as you
Yeah.
wish. Reza Pahlavi, that's his
Hmm.
name. Shah might be the title. Reza Pahlavi will have a problem of dealing with minorities, among other issues. And if
Sure.
you remember, I just a few minutes ago said he did not put as many people in the streets. He put a lot, but not as many as Khomeini put.
Hmm.
Let's face it, we don't like Khomeini, of course, but they brought more people to the streets and kept them there.
Hmm.
Kept them there. And see what the Egyptians did, by the way. They kept them in the Tahrir Square. They
Hmm.
didn't leave it. And even a regime, even dictatorial regimes in Egypt or in Iran could not just shoot 500,000 people like that and killing tens of thousands in front of the entire world. Even though there is no internet, you would have known it. So part of it has to do also with the minorities. Yes, the Kurds, I don't know about other big minorities, the Arabs in Awaz in the
Hmm.
south could be a
Hmm.
problem, and also the Azeris.
Hmm.
So, look, the Pahlavis wanted centralized Iran.
Hmm.
Iran is the most diversified ethnically and linguistically country in the Middle East. Maybe the Iranians, the Persians are only 50%.
Yeah.
And even among them, you have subgroups like the Lurs, the Bakhtiaris, the whatever, even the Pahlavis don't belong to the mainstream of the Persians. They are from
Hmm.
smaller group. So it's a problem. It's a very big problem, but nobody, of course, talks about it, as you said.
The
Look,
other
he's
thing
a
you
nice
said, that
guy.
have you also heard, like I've heard a lot of people talking about the Pahlavi being, because he was a Shah, king, whatever, it's continuation of King Cyrus, the next King Cyrus, although they have no connection with the
Yeah.
actual King Cyrus. So,
Look, he's a nice guy. He's a nice man. He's a leader. He's very pro-Israel. I mean, that's what he
mhm,
says. So obviously, I
yeah.
support him. I like him. But the analysts have to
Mhm,
separate between their
mhm,
sympathies and the objective situation on the ground. I don't know if Iran is ready to get back into a monarchy, and if at all, it should have been a constitutional monarchy, nothing like what it used to be, and all that. So look. But if we talk about the Kurds,
mhm,
we remember that the Kurds had a state in Iran for 1 year, from December 45 to December 46, the Ma'abad Republic.
mhm,
Qazi Muhammad, that was under Soviet influence. It's on the border with the Soviet
yeah.
Union. So, and of course, it was ended, when the Soviet decided to give up on Iran as part of the overall arrangements with the West and all that. I think think if you want any comparison, which I'm just throwing an idea now without,
Mhm,
it will have to be in Iran something similar to what happened in Spain after the fall of Franco.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the death of Franco and the end of fascism, because even though Franco was centralist and didn't recognize the Catalans, the Basques, and any other group, the monarchy that came, and he wanted to have a monarchy, but the monarchy became totally constitutional, but beyond that, also in agreement with the federated, basically, character of Spain. I think that they have about 10, even more, autonomous regions in Spain.
Mm-hmm.
So I cannot see a situation whereby this Islamic Republic collapses, hopefully,
Mm-hmm.
hopefully, of course.
Hopefully, yeah.
Yeah, hopefully. And there is a new Iran in which there is no large measure of self-rule for the Kurds, for example.
Mm-hmm.
We
Mm-hmm.
talk about the Kurds. Does the Pahlavi agree to this or no? We don't know. It doesn't talk about it. And cleverly so. I mean, why would he talk about it now? I mean, he should keep it open. But if you ask me, historically speaking, they objected to this.
Yeah, exactly. Historically, but maybe he has a chance to do better and
So
maybe
that's
he
why I'm
can.
saying, I mean, if
Mm.
I were his advisor, I would tell him, but
Yeah, but maybe he should be told, and maybe he can get some Kurdish support also that way if he but again, we know from history the Kurds are betrayed by
if
everyone.
it will be
So,
like the Barazani-led autonomous area in northern Iraq, the Kurds will go with it.
mhm.
I don't know how much the Turks would like it and how much
Yeah.
troubles they could cause. And they have a card in Iran, the Azeris.
Mm.
The
Mhm.
Azerbaijan is one thing, but the Azeris inside Iran. Look, I mean, the Azeri language is about 70, 80% Turkish, I mean, they're
Uh,
Turkic people, even though they're Shiis, but they're Turkic
mhm. Mhm.
ethnically. So, look, people don't really realize. I mean, people talk about Iran. Say, take 100 Americans and ask them about the composition of population of Iran. 99.9 will tell you they have no clue. But they are Iranians. They're all Iranians. Okay,
Mm.
they're all Iranians. Yeah.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
the same goes to Syria. I mean, what do they know? Yeah.
But a lot of Israelis also think Iran is just Persians and the lion is rising,
Yeah, of
Persia
course.
and all that. They don't
Not all
understand all the
Israel.
dynamics involved there with the minorities.
Israelis are also could
Yeah.
be ignorant like others. I mean, I mean, not Jews who come from Iran. They know otherwise, but.
Mm.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you ask Jews who
So,
come.
okay, so we can go on and on, of course, but we are aware of the time, so I can really like talk forever with you. But just one last thing, just in a short way, where do you see the future, or how do we save the future of the Middle East in a better way?
Well, there are going to be troubles in the Middle East. The
Mhm.
Middle East is inherently unstable because there are good reasons for being unstable.
Mhm.
The poverty, totalitarianism, the gaps between populations, the minority issue, all this. Look, we don't even talk about the civil war in Sudan with all the terrible things, or in Yemen that may have eased up a little bit, but uh, I'm not optimistic. Where I am optimistic is to develop what already exists.
Mhm.
So take, for example, the Abraham Accords. They seem to be working. Look at Morocco and Israel. Look at UAE and Israel. Look at Bahrain and Israel. Okay,
Mhm.
they seem to be working up to a point. To try to develop whatever can be working. Try to set realistic goals.
Mhm.
Realistic goals. But in the West, and that's something that I know I'm going to say, that people say, oh, what is he talking about? You have to educate the people about what the Middle East is all about.
Yeah.
And that is exactly the opposite of what's happening here.
Mhm.
I need to tell you, ironically speaking, today the south of the US is becoming the most tolerant area of this country. And you look at this history, the south with all its
Mhm.
racism, KKK and all that. What do they teach in America? What do they know about the situation? I mean, it is so, and why do I say all that? Because if you really want to help from the outside to the Middle East, you need to know more about the Middle East.
Absolutely.
And that brings it to our topic, the Kurds.
Mhm.
You can always argue the Kurds in the 19th century were helping Sultan Abdul Hamid against the Assyrians or other minorities with the Hamidiyya, as they called it. They even participated up to a point in the genocide of the Armenians. The terrible things happened,
Mm,
counter massacres as well with the Assyrians. But they deserve their rights, their freedom in all this, you
mhm,
know. You really want to do something positive, you know. So you have to look after all this.
mm,
And the same goes to Syria,
mm,
the others. And then people will say, what about you, Israelis? You preach to others. Look, I'm saying it all the time. There is no way for Israel other than to look for a Palestinian solution to the problem of Gaza,
mhm,
but a solution that will not be monitored by Turkey that supports Hamas, but by countries that would support the Palestinian Authority, which is not a good option, but least of the bad ones, if you look at Hamas as an alternative. So we need to go carefully, slowly, over issues that can be resolved
right.
rather than changing.
Mm,
Trump is under the illusion that he changed. What do you say after 3,000 years of history and all that? Finally, we have peace. I mean, because we respect him, we don't comment on
mm,
this, right? I mean,
mm, mm,
don't comment on this because we respect him after all. Uh, that's why I think that don't expect to any God knows what changes. If Egypt is 120 million people and they can't cater for them, there will be troubles in Egypt. When the oil of Saudi Arabia will cease to be God knows what important, or in Qatar, there will be troubles there.
mm,
These are objective situations. On the other hand, look at the UAE that is already moving ahead beyond the oil and triangle. Look at Morocco and so on and so
mm.
forth. So that gives me some optimism. Very,
Yeah.
very measured.
Yeah,
Very,
but
very
that's a
measured.
good point. Whatever can be done, we can do that. So let's start with that and take baby steps. And
Don't reinvent the wheel every so often.
hmm okay. And also education on the Middle East. I think that is a very good point. I just wish people would take more time instead of just yapping on things that they don't know.
But
Well,
that's why your podcast is so important. You see?
yeah, that's why I try. I mean, each of us can do our part. So, yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Thank
That
you.
it's been a real pleasure talking to you. Thank
My
you.
pleasure. Thank you very, very much. Have a nice week. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.